The night Vivian offered to fix my dress, she did it with hands too careful for someone who had spent the previous 2 weeks pretending I was nothing to her. I stood in front of the narrow mirror on the back of our apartment door, one shoulder strap twisted, the zipper caught halfway between my ribs, my hair pinned up badly because I had never learned how to make myself look effortless under pressure. The blue dress had belonged to my older cousin before she moved to Copenhagen, and it still carried the faint smell of cedar from the storage box, where I had kept it folded for years. I had chosen it because Marisol had said the gallery opening was not formal, exactly, but people would be dressed like they wanted to be remembered. I had not chosen it because I wanted Vivian to notice. That was what I told myself when she came home earlier than expected, shutting the apartment door with the soft, precise click that always made the space seem to rearrange itself around her. She paused in the doorway between the little kitchen and my bedroom, one hand still on the strap of her leather satchel, rain shining on the shoulders of her black coat. For a second, she simply looked at me. That was the problem with Vivian Vale. In public, she looked at everyone like she had already decided where they belonged in the room. At home, when she forgot herself, she looked at me like I was the room. "You're going out," she said. It was not a question. Her voice had the polished calm she used in critiques, at faculty dinners, in the elevator with donors who already knew her name. The same voice she had used in the hall outside Studio B when Sasha Marlowe had laughed and said, "Viv, I didn't know you and Anya were close." And Vivian had glanced at me as if I had accidentally stood too near her. "We're not," she had said then, smooth as a blade. "She's in my building." 3 months of midnight conversations, stolen kisses in the stairwell, my hand under hers on the kitchen table while we pretended to study fabric invoices, and she reduced me to an address. Now she stood in our doorway, looking at the dress Marisol would see, and something naked flickered across her face before she hid it. "Yes," I said, reaching back again for the zipper. "I'm going out." "With who?" I caught the zipper between 2 fingers and pulled too hard. It snagged. The sound was small, almost harmless, but my temper rose around it because I had been gentle for too long. "Someone who knows me," I said. Vivian did not move. Outside our 3rd-floor window, the rain ran down the glass in thin silver threads. Below, cars hissed along Hemlock Street. Somewhere in the apartment above ours, someone dragged a chair across the floor. It was such an ordinary evening for the kind of question that should have happened weeks earlier. Vivian set her satchel down. "Turn around." "No." "The zipper's caught in the lining. I can fix it." "You're pulling at an angle. You'll tear it." I met her eyes through the mirror. Her hair was damp, darker at the edges, and one loose strand had stuck near her cheek. She looked tired in a way she never allowed other people to see. I hated that I noticed. I hated more that I cared. I said I can fix it. "You also said you were fine the night you came home and washed your hands for 10 minutes after Laurel spilled wine on you at the donor lunch." My fingers went still. She should not have remembered that. She should not have known I had washed my hands until my knuckles reddened because Laurel, queen of the photography department and Vivian's most loyal audience, had called me the quiet one from housing, while smiling as if she had invented kindness. She should not have noticed anything after she had laughed with them and let my name disappear from the conversation. "Don't," I said. Vivian took one step into the room. "Anya." There it was, my name in her private voice. Softer, lower, almost guilty. The first time she had used it like that had been in October, when I had fallen asleep at our kitchen table over a pile of textile samples and woken with her coat around my shoulders. She had been standing by the stove, making tea she claimed was for herself, though she put honey in mine exactly the way I liked it. Back then, I had not known that a person could be tender in the dark and cowardly under fluorescent lights. I had not known the same mouth could kiss the corner of mine in a stairwell, and later shape the words "we're not." "Don't say my name like it still belongs to you," I said. Her face changed, but she only nodded once, like she had deserved the hit, and would not argue with the wound. "I'm not trying to stop you from going," she said. "I'm asking to fix the dress so you don't spend the night thinking about it." "Why would you care what I spend the night thinking about?" For the first time, Vivian looked away. That should have satisfied me. It did not. I was still half zipped, half ready, Half in love with someone who had made me feel foolish for believing affection was evidence. I had been avoiding her for 2 weeks with the discipline of a surgeon, timing my showers, taking breakfast in the studio, answering her messages with words so plain they could have been copied from a receipt. She had respected the distance at first, or maybe she had been too proud to challenge it. Then Marisol asked me out at lunch, and Vivian's careful world tilted. The invitation had not been dramatic. That was why it mattered. Marisol Keene did not throw herself into people's lives like a storm. She was a lighting designer in the theater program, warm-voiced, clever, always smelling faintly of sawdust and orange peel from the fruit she carried in the pockets of her oversized jackets. She had been kind to me before anyone had a reason to be. She had noticed when I changed my route to avoid the west hallway. She had asked if I wanted company without asking what had happened. She had made me laugh at a time when laughter felt like a language I had forgotten. At lunch, she had set her tray down across from mine in the glass atrium and said, "There's an opening at the Rourke Gallery on Friday. I'm going because one of my light installations is being treated like an appliance by 3 men in expensive shoes. I could use moral support." "I'm not good at threatening men in expensive shoes," I had said. "That's why I like you. You look polite until you start asking very specific questions." I had smiled, truly smiled. And that was when Vivian, 2 tables away, stopped mid-sentence. Marisol noticed. She glanced over, then back at me, reading the room without making a performance of it. "You don't have to answer now," she said. "And you don't have to say yes because someone is watching. I'm asking because I like talking to you. That's all." That was the first honest thing anyone had given me in days. "I'd like to go," I said. Vivian's fork touched her plate with a sound sharp enough that Laurel looked at her. Vivian did not announce anything. She did not claim me. She did not storm across the atrium like a jealous cliché. She only went still, then stood too quickly, then left her untouched salad behind. By evening, the whole 5th floor knew that Vivian Vale had walked out of lunch for the first time in living memory. Now she was in my room, offering to fix my dress. I turned around because the dress was going to tear, and because part of me, some stubborn, grieving part, wanted her to stand close enough to understand what she had chosen to lose. Vivian approached as if I might vanish if she moved too fast. Her fingers lifted the twisted strap first. She did not touch my skin without warning. "The strap is folded." "I know. I'm going to straighten it." I almost laughed. "You're narrating now?" "Yes." "Why?" Her eyes met mine in the mirror. "Because I should have asked more often." The words landed somewhere I was not ready to name. She adjusted the strap with the lightest pressure, then moved to the zipper. Her hand brushed the fabric at the center of my back. Not my skin, but the awareness of her there was worse, because it remembered every time she had known exactly where to touch me. The nights she had sat cross-legged on my bed while I sewed beads back onto a sample gown. The morning she had kissed me beside the washing machine because the spin cycle was loud enough to hide the sound. The afternoon she had cried without tears after a phone call from her mother and let me hold her hand until her breathing slowed. "What's her name?" Vivian asked. "You know her name." "I want to hear you say it." "That's not fair." "I know." The zipper slid up 1 careful inch. "Marisol," I said. "Her name is Marisol." Vivian's fingers paused. "Do you like her?" I looked at her through the mirror. She didn't pretend I was a stranger. Her jaw tightened, then relaxed, as if she had forced herself not to defend. "That wasn't what I asked." "It's the answer you earned." The zipper reached the top. She hooked the small clasp with steady hands, then stepped back. She could have stopped there. She could have let me leave with the kind of dignity she had denied me in front of everyone else. Instead, she looked at me like the words were being dragged from somewhere she had locked for years. "Why are you going out with someone else?" I turned slowly. "Because you made me feel single." The apartment went quiet around us. The worst part was that Vivian understood immediately. Her face did not show shock, only pain sharpened by recognition. She had always been intelligent enough to know what she was doing. That had been the cruelty of it. She had never denied me by accident. "I was scared," she said. "I know. I thought if they knew, they'd take pieces of it, make jokes, ask questions, tell my mother, turn us into something everyone could handle. So you turned me into nothing first." Her mouth opened, closed. She looked past me at the mirror, at both of us reflected there. Me in the blue dress, her in the black coat. Two women who had learned each other's breakfast habits and still could not stand honestly in a hallway. "I don't want you to go with her," Vivian said. It was the first selfish thing she had admitted without dressing it up as concern. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I felt tired. "You don't get to want that quietly anymore." She looked back at me. "You don't get to ask why I'm going out with someone else when you wouldn't let anyone know I was going home to you," I said. "You had months to choose me when no one was clapping, when no one was watching, when it would have mattered. You waited until someone else asked." "I know." "No, Vivian, I don't think you do. Because if you did, you wouldn't be asking me why I'm going. You'd be asking what you can do after I leave." Her eyes shone, though no tears fell. Vivian Vale, who could charm donors, silence rooms, and make professors rewrite deadlines with one calm question, stood in front of me looking younger than I'd ever seen her. "What can I do after you leave?" she asked. The question hurt more than the jealousy, because it sounded like surrender. I picked up my small black purse from the bed. "Start telling the truth when it costs you something." Then I walked out before she could touch me again. I wished the story began there, with the dress and the door and the kind of line people imagine they will say when they finally become strong. But the truth was messier. Strength did not arrive all at once. Mine came in fragments, in unanswered messages, in lunches taken at crowded tables, in the moment I moved my toothbrush from the shared cup, because even that felt too intimate after the hallway. Vivian and I had met in August, on the hottest day of orientation week at Lydian House, the graduate residence attached to the Holbrook Institute for Design and Applied Arts. I was 24, there on a scholarship so specific it sounded like a dare. Adaptive garment construction for disabled performers. Vivian was 25, already famous in the program because her mother owned Vale and Ven, a heritage fashion house that dressed actors, politicians, and women who never carried their own coats. Vivian had declined a guaranteed position there to enter Holbrook's competitive design residency, which made people admire her independence while still admiring the money that made independence easier. I disliked her before I knew her. It was easier that way. Vivian moved through campus like someone who had never arrived anywhere uninvited. She knew how to stand under attention without flinching. She wore white shirts without spilling coffee on them. She answered questions and critique with graceful precision, never defensive, never too eager. When the residence director told us there had been a clerical error and the two of us would be sharing the last two-bedroom apartment on Hemlock Street, Vivian looked at me, looked at my fraying tote bag, and said, "I'm sure we can be civil." Civil. As if I were a border dispute. For the first month we were exactly that. Civil. She labeled her shelves in the refrigerator. I pretended not to notice that she drank chamomile tea only after phone calls from home. She pretended not to notice that I kept a folded acceptance letter in the front pocket of my sketchbook and touched it when I thought I had failed. We were polite about laundry, careful with noise, and ruthless in class. If Vivian suggested silk veil for a structural assignment, I suggested coated cotton because it could survive sweat and rain. If I presented a garment with magnetic closures, she asked whether the magnets interfered with prosthetic components. If she built a jacket so beautiful it made the room sigh, I asked if beauty counted if no one could fasten it without help. Our professors loved putting us after each other. The class loved watching. "You two should just fight with knives and spare us the vocabulary," Marisol said once, weeks before she ever asked me out. Vivian heard and smiled. Anya would win. She has less to lose. I had thought it was an insult. Later I realized it was the first time she saw me clearly. The first real shift happened at 1:17 in the morning during a storm that made the old residence windows tremble. I had stayed up repairing the seam of a prototype sleeve after a visiting critic called my work earnest, a word people used when they wanted to praise your ethics instead of your skill. I was at the kitchen table, needle between my lips, anger hot behind my eyes, when Vivian came out of her room in a gray sweater and bare feet. "You're going to sew your finger to the cuff," she said. "Good, then at least the cuff will be attached to something." She paused beside the kettle. Was he wrong? I glared at her. Not about the work, she said. About the way he framed it. That was Vivian's habit, making distinctions so clean they felt like incisions. He said my construction was sentimental. He said your intention was sentimental. Your construction is stubborn and over-engineered, but not sentimental. I should have thrown a spool at her. Instead, I laughed because stubborn and over-engineered was the closest anyone had come to understanding the thing I was trying to make. Vivian made tea. She set a cup beside me without asking. Honey, no lemon. I had never told her. You notice too much? I said. Occupational hazard. Of being rich? Of being lonely in rooms full of people. It was the first honest thing she gave me, and it changed the weather between us. After that, intimacy built the way water finds cracks. Quietly, then everywhere. She began sitting at the kitchen table while I worked late, claiming the light was better there. I began leaving extra rice in the cooker, because she forgot dinner when she was patterning. She brought home a thimble from an antique market, because mine had split. I repaired the lining of her favorite coat, and found an old movie ticket in the pocket, dated 5 years earlier. When I handed it back, she went still. My father took me, she said, before he left. I did not ask where he went. She did not explain. Instead, she sat beside me on the floor while I pinned the lining flat, and when her knee touched mine, neither of us moved away. The first kiss happened in the laundry room because our lives had no sense of ceremony. The dryer had eaten one of my black socks. Vivian was wearing a cream camisole under an unbuttoned shirt, her hair clipped up messily, and I was accusing her of having cursed the machines through aristocratic neglect. You think I don't know how to use a dryer? She asked. I think you've never had to negotiate with one. The dryer and I have an understanding. The dryer hates you too? Her smile came slowly, like sunrise behind a curtain. 2. I realized what I had said and turned back to the machine. Forget it. She stepped closer. You hate me. Frequently. How frequently? When you correct my stitches. You pull too tight. When you put empty mugs in the sink instead of rinsing them. I do rinse them. You perform rinsing near them. She laughed, and the sound startled both of us. It was not the polished laugh she used in public. It had no audience. It belonged to the tiled laundry room, the humming machines, the two of us standing too close with damp heat around our ankles. Then she touched my wrist. Just that. 2 fingers, gentle, asking without words. I looked down at her hand. Vivian. I know, she said, though neither of us knew anything yet. She kissed me carefully, as if she expected me to vanish. I kissed her back less carefully because I had spent a month pretending I did not think about her mouth when she argued. The dryer buzzed loudly enough to make us jump apart. We stared at each other, breathless and foolish, until Vivian laughed again and leaned her forehead against mine. After that, we became something without naming it, where other people could hear. In private, Vivian was not the woman the Institute adored. She was still sharp, still impossible, but she softened in ways that felt more dangerous than flirtation. She put her cold feet under my thigh while reading. She sent me photographs of ugly chairs from antique shops, with the caption, "This looks like your moral philosophy." She kissed me beside the pantry, in the stairwell, against the inside of our front door, with her keys still in her hand. She remembered that I hated mint toothpaste, and bought cinnamon by accident on purpose. She fell asleep once with her head in my lap while rain pressed against the windows. And I sat there for 40 minutes afraid to breathe too loudly. In public, she became weatherproof. At first I understood, or I told myself I did. Holbrook was small and ravenous. Everyone knew everyone's work, failures, funding, family rumors, breakups, and lunch orders. Vivian had a mother who called twice a week and believed image was a form of currency. She had friends who treated vulnerability like a trend they could evaluate. I had a scholarship that required annual review, and no appetite for becoming a story people told with raised eyebrows. Secrecy felt practical, mature, temporary. Then temporary grew teeth. Vivian would sit beside me and critique only if no one else had arrived yet. If Laurel or Priya or one of her sleek, orbiting friends came in, She moved her bag to another chair as if she had never saved me the seat. She never touched me outside our apartment, not even casually. When people joked about our rivalry, she smiled and let it stand. When my name came up in her circle, she said Anya Reed, with the distant respect of someone citing a reference. At home, she would reach for me as soon as the door closed. "You disappear when they arrive," I told her once in November, while she stood behind me at the bathroom sink, unpinning my hair after a faculty mixer. "I'm trying not to make you uncomfortable." That was almost clever enough to be true. I met her eyes in the mirror. "Is that what you're doing?" Her hands stilled in my hair. "I don't want them touching this." "This?" "Us. There is no us if it can only survive behind a locked door." She looked wounded, and I hated myself for hurting her, which is how I learned how easily love could be trained to apologize for asking to exist. "Give me time," she said. So I did. I gave her December, when she held my hand under a blanket while we watched an old film and told me her mother had once said affection made women careless. I gave her January, when she kissed me at midnight on New Year's Eve in our kitchen, because we had both skipped parties and pretended it was coincidence. I gave her February, when she came to my room after a brutal call from Vale and Venn and whispered, "I don't know who I am when I'm not being watched," and I held her until she slept. By March, giving her time had become another way of taking it from myself. The public denial happened on a Tuesday afternoon in the materials lab. It should have been forgettable. That was part of its cruelty. There was no dramatic music, no crowded ballroom, no rain against windows. Just fluorescent lights, cutting mats, the smell of steamed wool, and a dozen students waiting for the industrial press. I had been running on 3 hours of sleep because Vivian had stayed up with me the night before, helping me solve a shoulder mechanism for my final project. She had sat on my bedroom floor surrounded by muslin scraps, her glasses sliding down her nose, saying things like, "What if the hinge follows the breath instead of the joint?" At 2 in the morning, after the mechanism finally worked, she kissed the inside of my wrist and said, "You are brilliant in a way people underestimate, until it's too late." I carried that sentence into the lab like a match cupped in both hands. Vivian was near the storage drawers with Laurel and Priya when I came in. She saw me. I knew she saw me because her face changed by 1 degree before it became perfect again. I had her spare pattern ruler in my tote, the one she had left in my room. It was expensive, engraved with her initials, and I had meant to return it quietly. "Viv," I said, forgetting for half a second that names had rules in public. "You left this upstairs." I held out the ruler. Laurel turned first. Her eyes moved from my face to the ruler to Vivian, quick and delighted. "Viv?" It was not the nickname. Everyone called her Viv. It was the implication in my voice. The ease. Vivian looked at the ruler like it was evidence from a crime scene. Then she smiled politely. "I'm sorry," she said. "You must have mistaken it for someone else's." The lab noise continued. Steam hissed. Someone laughed near the dye sinks. My hand remained in the air. Her initials were engraved at the end. V.E.V. Vivian Elise Vale. She knew. I knew. Laurel knew enough to enjoy not knowing. "I found it in the apartment," I said quietly. Vivian's smile did not move. "Lots of residents use the common studio." Common studio. Not my room, not our kitchen table, not the floor where she had kissed my wrist 5 hours earlier. Priya looked uncomfortable. Laurel looked fascinated. I lowered my hand. "Right." Vivian did not stop me when I placed the ruler on the nearest table. She did not follow when I walked out before the press was free. I did not cry in the hallway. I had imagined that kind of humiliation would break loudly. It did not. It entered me with perfect manners, removed its coat, and sat down. I went to the adaptive lab in the basement, locked myself in the storage office, and stared at a rack of foam shoulder forms until the shape of my life rearranged itself. I did not decide to stop loving Vivian. Love does not obey injury that neatly. I decided something colder and more useful. I would stop cooperating with my own erasure. That evening, Vivian came home with my favorite soup from the place near the bus stop. I was packing a small canvas bag with clothes for the next day. "Where are you going?" she asked. "To Kira's couch." Kira was not a gossip friend. She was a second-year sculptural footwear student with a shaved head, a magnificent intolerance for nonsense, and a studio couch no one should have slept on unless emotionally desperate. Vivian set the soup down. "Anya, please." I kept folding a sweater. "I panicked," she said. "That implies surprise." "I wasn't prepared." "You had 3 months." Her mouth tightened. "Laurel was watching." "So you performed." "I made a mistake." I turned to her then because I wanted to see whether she believed that word. Mistake. As if she had dropped a glass. As if she had not weighed me against a room and chosen the room. "You made a choice," I said. "I'm going to make one too." Her eyes moved to the canvas bag. "Are we ending?" The question was almost childlike. It might have softened me once. That night, it showed me how much comfort she had taken from my patience. "I don't know what we are," I said. "You made sure no one else did either." I left the soup untouched. Kira's couch was too short, but the room smelled like leather glue and peppermint, and she did not ask questions until morning. She found me awake at 6, sitting under a quilt shaped like a geography mistake, and handed me coffee so strong it made my teeth reconsider loyalty. "Do I need to know whether I'm hiding you from a murderer, a mother, or a woman with cheekbones?" she asked. Cheekbones. Devastating. Those are hardest to prosecute. I laughed, and it came out rough, but real. Kira listened while I told her the short version. She did not gasp or call Vivian evil. She only leaned against her workbench, arms crossed, and said, "So she likes the version of love where she gets comfort without consequence." That sentence became a tool. For the next week, I avoided Vivian with tactical precision. I returned to the apartment only when I knew she had late studio. I showered before dawn. I stopped using the kitchen table. I put the cinnamon toothpaste in my own drawer because the sight of it beside hers felt ridiculous. Like evidence presented to a jury, no one had convened. Vivian tried to speak to me in ways small enough to preserve her pride. A text asking if I had eaten. A note on the fridge saying the landlord would inspect the smoke detector. A folded umbrella left by my door on the day it rained. I accepted the umbrella because self-respect did not require pneumonia. I did not answer the note. Avoidance did not make me powerful. It made me quiet. But quiet gave me room to hear other things. I heard that people liked my work, when Vivian was not standing beside it, like a more elegant translation. I heard Professor Eames say my final project had a stubborn generosity that made me roll my eyes and then write the phrase down. I heard Marisol laugh at my dry comment about a donor installation shaped like a boiled lung. I heard my own voice at lunch one day, joining a conversation before someone invited me. That was how Marisol found me in the atrium with Kira and 2 theater students, eating noodles from a container balanced on my sketchbook. "I have a professional emergency," she announced, dropping into the seat beside me. Kira looked her up and down. "You look too calm for an emergency." "I contain multitudes." Marisol opened her laptop and turned it toward us. On the screen was a lighting plan full of red circles. "Tell me honestly, does this look like mood, or does it look like everyone at the work gallery is about to confess to tax fraud?" Kira said, "Both." "Which is ideal?" Marisol turned to me. "Anya?" I studied the plan because she had asked, like my opinion had weight. "The side wash is too dramatic for textile work. It'll flatten anything with texture. If you lower the angle here, people can see surface variation without feeling interrogated." Marisol stared at me. "What?" "That was specific and attractive." Kira choked on a noodle. Heat rose in my face. "I meant the lights." "I know." Marisol smiled, not teasing cruelly, not performing for the table. That's why it worked. Across the atrium, Vivian sat with Laurel, Priya, and 2 third-year curators. I knew she was there before I looked because my body had not yet unlearned her. She was wearing the dark green jacket I had once repaired after the lining tore. Her hands were folded around a paper cup. She was not speaking. Marisol glanced over, then closed her laptop halfway. Ignore this if it's badly timed, but the Rourke opening is Friday. I need someone beside me who can tell rich people their lighting opinions are wrong without technically insulting them. Would you want to come with me? Kira suddenly found her noodles fascinating. I understood the shape of the moment. I understood Vivian could hear if she chose to. I understood saying yes would create a story. What surprised me was that none of those things became the reason. Marisol asked because she liked me. She had liked me before my life became a quiet scandal. She had seen my skill, my humor, my habit of over-explaining seams when nervous, and she had decided to step closer. That deserved an answer not built around Vivian. I'd like that, I said, but I should be honest. I'm complicated right now. Marisol's expression softened, though her voice stayed light. Most interesting wiring is, I don't want to use you to prove something to someone else. Good, I don't want to be used. I want to look at art, complain about bad champagne, and maybe have dinner after if the company is good. I smiled despite myself. That sounds dangerously reasonable. Reasonable is my seductive flaw, Kira muttered. I'm begging both of you to remember I'm eating. Then Vivian stood. She did not cross the room. Not then. That would have required a courage she had not built yet. But she stood so abruptly that her chair scraped the polished floor, and Laurel stopped speaking. Vivian looked at me, and for one unguarded second the whole atrium saw something pass across her face that did not belong to rivalry. Then she picked up her untouched coffee and left. Rumors began before the lunch hour ended. Not dramatic ones at first. Holbrook had better taste than shouting. It preferred suggestion, glances, sentences unfinished when someone entered. By 4 o'clock, Priya asked Kira whether I was seeing someone from theater. By 5, Laurel told someone that Vivian had seemed strangely affected by my little date situation. By dinner, a first-year in residence asked me whether Marisol and I were together, and when I said no, she looked almost disappointed by the lack of content. Vivian waited for me in the stairwell that night. I should have expected it. The stairwell had always been ours because no one at Holbrook used stairs voluntarily above the second floor. She stood on the landing between 3 and 4, coat over one arm, face pale with something held too tightly. "Are you going?" she asked. "To my apartment?" "To the gallery, with Marisol." I looked up at her from the lower step. "Yes." Her fingers tightened on the coat. "Because you want to?" "Yes." She absorbed that like a sentence. "Did you think I'd say no because you looked upset at lunch?" I asked. "No." "Did you hope?" Her honesty arrived late, but clean. "Yes." I stepped onto the landing but did not come closer. "That's the problem. I know. You keep saying that. Because I'm trying not to argue with the truth." The stairwell smelled faintly of dust and rainwater tracked in by someone's boots. Above us, a door opened. Voices spilled briefly, then cut off. Vivian looked toward the sound automatically, and I laughed once without humor. "There it is." Her face tightened. "Anya." "No, don't. You still check who might see before you decide what you're allowed to feel." She looked ashamed. That mattered less than I wished. "I told Laurel the truth," she said. "I did not expect that." "What truth?" "That the ruler was mine, that I lied in the lab." Something in me shifted, but not enough to step closer. "Why?" "Because she made a joke." "What kind?" Vivian's mouth pressed flat. "About you trying to attach yourself to me." The old me might have asked exactly what was said, then stored the words for future self-punishment. The new me recognized the trap and stepped around it. "And you corrected her?" "Yes." "In front of people?" "Priya, the curators, 2 faculty assistants." The first consequence? A small one, but real. I imagined Vivian standing there with her perfect posture, choosing discomfort after comfort had already cost me. I wanted to forgive her for that alone. Wanting frightened me. "What did Laurel say?" She laughed. Then she asked if I was collecting strays. My hand curled around the railing. Vivian's voice dropped. "I told her if she spoke about you that way again, she would not be welcome on my final presentation team." Laurel had been campaigning for that position for months. Vivian's team meant attention, access, a likely industry placement. It was not a confession, but it was not nothing. "Thank you," I said. Vivian looked hurt by the politeness. "I don't know how to do this," she said. I noticed. A faint, miserable smile touched her mouth. "I deserved that." "You deserve worse." "I'm trying to be proportionate." "I don't want you to go with her," she said again. But this time it came without demand. More like a wound she was reporting so it could be treated properly. I know. I also know that isn't a reason for you not to go. Good. She looked at the railing between us. I miss you. That one almost did what she wanted. Not because it was manipulative, because it was true. I could hear the shape of our apartment inside it. The kettle, the table, the dryer, her socked feet tucked under my leg. I missed her too, but missing someone was not proof they deserved access. I'm not gone because you miss me, I said. I'm gone because you made staying hurt. She nodded, and something about the way she did not defend herself stayed with me long after I walked past her. Friday arrived with cold rain and the kind of wind that turned umbrellas inside out for sport. I returned to the apartment at 5 because I needed the blue dress, and because avoidance had begun to feel like letting Vivian control the map. She was not home yet. I showered, pinned my hair, and discovered the zipper hated me. Then she arrived. Then she fixed the dress. Then she asked why I was going out with someone else, and I told her the truth. I met Marisol at the Rourke Gallery at 7:30. She wore a rust-colored suit and boots with silver buckles. Her dark curls pinned to one side with a pencil she insisted was decorative until she used it to adjust a lighting cue. When she saw me, she smiled in a way that did not ask who had helped with my zipper. You look like you know exactly which painting is fake, she said. I look nervous. Yes, but with expertise. The gallery was all white walls, polished concrete, and people pretending not to look at price lists. Marisol introduced me to her colleagues as Anya, who knows more about fabric under light than all of us combined, which was extravagant and untrue but kind. She did not touch me without invitation. She did not perform interest for Vivian's benefit. In fact, she did not mention Vivian at all until we stood near a suspended textile piece that looked like a cloud unraveling. She's here, Marisol said quietly. I did not need to ask who. Vivian stood near the entrance with Professor Eames and a donor from Vale and Venn. She wore a black dress with a severe neckline and no jewelry except the small silver ring she twisted when anxious. Her mother stood beside her. I had seen Celeste Vale only in photographs and once across a campus auditorium. In person, she was terrifyingly composed, silver blonde hair cut to her jaw, face elegant in a way that suggested disappointment was her native language. She looked at the room as if estimating how much of it she could buy without liking any of it. Vivian saw me, saw Marisol, saw the blue dress she had fixed. This time she did not look away. Celeste followed her gaze and said something I could not hear. Vivian answered, without moving her eyes from me. Celeste's expression sharpened. Marisol held out a glass of sparkling water. You don't have to deal with that tonight. I know. Do you want to leave? The question was so simple. No drama. No test. No, I said after a moment. I want to look at the piece in the back room. The one with the shadow grid. Excellent choice. It makes people feel haunted by math. We moved through the gallery. Vivian did not follow. That mattered. Or maybe I made it matter because I needed evidence that she was learning restraint. Marisol and I talked about light, fabric, why gallery snacks always looked like punishment, and whether rich people were trained to laugh without showing molars. I relaxed by degrees. Near 9, one of the donors cornered Marisol about dimming levels, and I stepped onto the narrow balcony for air. The rain had stopped. The city below was wet and bright. Every street lamp doubled in the pavement. The door opened behind me. May I come out? Vivian asked. I almost said no. Not because I wanted her gone, but because I wanted to know I could. Yes, I said finally. She stepped onto the balcony and left space between us. Your dress survived. You sound proud of the zipper. I'm trying to begin with a neutral subject. Your neutral subjects need work. Yes. For a moment we stood with the city between sentences. My mother asked about you, Vivian said. That sounds ominous. It was. She asked why I was staring at a scholarship student in last year's dress. I looked at her. The words should have embarrassed me. Instead, I felt a cold, clear anger I could stand inside. What did you say? Vivian turned the silver ring once. That you were Anya Reed, your work was better than half the sponsored artists in the room. And the dress looked beautiful, because you knew how to wear history without being owned by it. I had no idea what to do with that. She didn't like that, Vivian added. I'm sure. She said attachment makes women careless. There was the sentence, the origin of the bruise. I looked out at the wet street so I would not soften too fast. And? And I said maybe detachment had made her cruel. I turned back. Vivian's face was pale, but not fragile. She looked frightened and steady at the same time. Courage, I realized, was not the absence of fear in her. It was fear being forced to share the room with a decision. She left shortly after, Vivian said. That cost you. Yes. Are you telling me so I'll reward you? No, she swallowed. I'm telling you because you said to start telling the truth when it cost something. I don't know if I did it well, but I did it. The balcony door opened before I could answer. Marisol stepped out, saw us, and paused. Sorry, she said. I didn't mean to interrupt. Vivian looked at her, and I saw jealousy move through her. Not the sharp, possessive version from lunch. Something more complicated. She saw Marisol clearly then, not as a threat-shaped blur, but as a person who had treated me with dignity, when she had not. You're not interrupting, Vivian said. Marisol's eyebrows lifted slightly. Vivian turned to me. I'll go back inside. I believed, in that moment, that leaving hurt her. She did it anyway. After she went, Marisol came to stand beside me at the railing. She's trying, she said. I laughed softly. That's a generous thing to say on a date. I'm generous when well lit. I'm sorry. Don't be. She leaned her elbows on the railing. I asked you out knowing there was weather. I'm not allergic to weather. I just don't want to be mistaken for shelter if you're still deciding where home is. That was Marisol, kind without being vague, direct without turning herself into a weapon. I like you, I said. I know, I smiled, confident. Lighting designers thrive in darkness. I'm not ready to be with someone new. Her expression changed only a little, but I saw the disappointment because she did not hide it behind charm. I suspected. But I wanted to come because I like being around you. Because when you asked, I felt like a person with options, not someone waiting outside a locked door. That's a heavy compliment. It's the honest one, Marisol nodded. Then let's keep the part where you're a person. We can decide later what kind of options we are. I nearly cried, which would have ruined the clean line of my eyeliner, and possibly my reputation as someone who could critique lighting while emotionally stable. Thank you, I said. Don't thank me yet. I'm still making you help me insult the champagne. By Monday, the rumors had matured. Vivian had corrected Laurel. Vivian had argued with her mother. Vivian had spoken to Anya Reed on a gallery balcony while Marisol keen-watched. Vivian had been jealous. Vivian had been rejected. Vivian and Anya had been secretly together since September. Vivian and Anya hated each other so much it became romantic, which Kira found hilarious, and I found academically insulting. Holbrook did not know what to do with partial truth. It kept trying on uglier versions. The most damaging rumor came from Laurel, though I could not prove it at first. She told 2 faculty assistants that I had exaggerated a private friendship with Vivian to gain access to Vale and Venn materials. By noon, Professor Eames asked me whether I felt comfortable submitting my final project without external influence. His tone was careful, too careful. I understood then that secrecy did not simply hide love. It made room for other people to define it. I left his office furious enough to shake. Vivian was waiting outside, and when she saw my face, whatever she had planned to say vanished. What happened? Ask your friends. She went very still. Laurel? I don't know. Someone decided I'm using you for access. Her eyes changed. The public Vivian arrived, cold and immediate. For the first time, I was not afraid of that version. I was relieved she existed. Come with me, she said. No. That stopped her. I'm not being dragged into a room where you fix this while I stand there like a damaged object, I said. If we handle it in a way that doesn't make me disappear again. Her shoulders lowered a fraction. You're right. I know. A faint smile flickered despite the moment. I was going to say we should speak to Eames together. Together how? As 2 people whose work has been misrepresented, and as two people who have a private relationship that I lied about in public. The hallway seemed to hold its breath. You'd say that? I should have said it before someone used the silence against you. We went to Professor Eames together, not hand in hand. I was not ready for symbolism, but side by side, which was its own kind of architecture. Eames listened from behind his cluttered desk, while Vivian explained that I had never used her connections, materials, or family resources for my work. She stated that my project was mine entirely. Then, before he could look relieved and end the meeting, she added, I also need to correct something. Anya and I have been personally involved. I denied that implication publicly because I was afraid of attention. That was my decision, not hers. Any rumor framing her as manipulative began because I allowed people to believe there was nothing to respect. Eames removed his glasses. I see. I almost laughed because adults in institutions always said, I see, when they meant this will be paperwork. Vivian did not flinch. If the concern is conflict of interest, we can document that we are in different evaluation groups. If the concern is access, audit the material logs. If the concern is gossip, I suggest faculty not dignify it by calling scholarship students into offices without evidence. It was sharp. Too sharp, maybe. Eames deserved some of it, but not all. Vivian's hand, resting on the arm of her chair, curled once. I spoke before she could continue. I'm willing to provide my process documentation. I have dated photos, independent supply receipts, and prototype notes. I'd prefer the work be evaluated on that record. Eames looked from Vivian to me. Something in his expression shifted. Respect, maybe, or the recognition that I would not hide behind Vivian's power any more than I would be crushed by it. That seems appropriate, he said. I apologize for the implication, Anya. I accepted because I needed the apology on record, not because it healed anything. Outside, Vivian looked shaken. You were very calm, she said. So were you, until you threatened the entire faculty culture. I didn't threaten. I suggested. You suggested with teeth. She smiled, then looked away. I wanted to do worse. I know. That isn't always good. No, I said. But today you stopped when I asked. That matters. The next week changed the shape of us. Not fixed. Changed. Vivian stopped trying to catch me alone and began doing things where others could see. She sat beside me in the library. Not close enough to claim, but close enough to stop pretending distance was natural. When Laurel entered, Vivian did not move. When Priya asked whether they were still meeting for the Vale presentation, Vivian said, not with Laurel, and kept reading. In critique, she challenged a professor who praised my project as compassionate by saying, it's technically rigorous. Compassion is not a substitute for engineering. I could have kissed her for that if I were the kind of woman who rewarded public growth with private access. I was trying not to be. Marisol and I became friends with a careful honesty that felt like walking across a bridge neither of us wanted to burn. We went to 2 more gallery events, one as a date-ish thing, one clearly as friends. She told me about her mother, a stage manager who had taught her that love was mostly remembering where people stood in the dark. I told her about Vivian without turning her into a villain, or a prize. Marisol listened, then said, whatever you choose, don't choose the version of yourself that only exists in reaction to her. Kira approved of Marisol. Kira also approved of Vivian's suffering, which she called educational discomfort. You're enjoying this too much, I told her one night while we worked in the studio, me on a sleeve prototype, her on a boot with a heel shaped like a question mark. I enjoy consequences. They're rare in our field. Vivian is not a case study. No, but she has excellent posture for one. The first time Vivian and I truly talked without arguing was 3 weeks after the lab denial. It happened on the roof of Lydian House, where residents went to smoke, cry, or pretend city air counted as nature. I went up after midnight because my room felt too full of thoughts. Vivian was already there, sitting on the low wall with a coat around her shoulders and a paper bag beside her. I can leave, she said. You always say that now. I mean it now. That was why I stayed. She opened the paper bag and took out a small container. I brought the almond biscuits from the bakery you like. I was going to leave them outside your door, which I realize has become my main personality. I took one because I was tired of denying myself biscuits to make philosophical points. We ate in the cold, facing the city. My mother called, Vivian said after a while. She wants me to withdraw from the final showcase and come home for the spring campaign. Because of me? Because I embarrassed her. You're the shape she gave the embarrassment. I considered that. What will you do? I told her no. I waited. Vivian looked down at her hands. She said I was throwing away a future for a girl who would leave once she understood the scale of what I was. I said, if my future required me to become someone who could deny a woman I loved in a room full of people, it wasn't mine. The words moved through me slowly. Loved. Not liked. Not wanted. Loved. Vivian did not look at me after saying it. That restraint did more to prove change than any speech could. You don't have to respond, she said. I didn't say it to corner you. I know. I should have known earlier that secrecy protected nothing. It only protected my image of myself as someone who wasn't hurting you. I held the biscuit container between my palms. Why were you so afraid? She stared out at the city. Because my mother taught me that being seen is the same as being judged, and being judged is the same as being controlled. If no one knew what mattered to me, no one could use it. Then you mattered, and I treated you like evidence to hide. It was the first explanation that did not sound like an excuse. I'm angry at you, I said. I know. I still want to tell you things. Her breath changed. I hate that part, I added, a small, sad smile. I don't. You wouldn't. No, I'm selfish enough to be grateful for any part of you that still turns toward me. That was Vivian at her most dangerous. Honest enough to disarm me without asking for anything. I'm not ready to come back, I said. To the apartment? To whatever we were, she nodded. Then I'll keep learning how to be someone you might choose later. If later never comes, I'll still need to be that person. I looked at her then. The city lights cut her profile into silver and shadow. For months I had mistaken her fear for mystery, her restraint for elegance. Now I saw the work underneath. Ugly, necessary, incomplete. Good, I said. She laughed softly. You're very hard to impress. You used to like that. I still do. The final showcase was 6 weeks away, and Holbrook became less an institute than a pressure cooker with better typography. People slept in studios. Someone cried into a bolt of organza. Kira threatened a sewing machine by name. Marisol designed lighting for 3 installations and began carrying 2 pencils in her hair, for symmetry and emotional stability. My project became a garment called the breathing jacket, though I never called it that in my notes because titles made me superstitious. It was a structured coat designed for performers with limited shoulder mobility, built with concealed expansion panels, magnetic closures, and a hinge system that responded to torso movement. It looked elegant because people deserved beauty without needing to ask for access as a favor. It worked because I had torn it apart 18 times, until function stopped apologizing for itself. Vivian's project was a collection of 3 garments based on public armor and private softness. She never said it was about us. She did not have to. One jacket looked severe from the front, but opened at the back through a hidden release that could be operated by the wearer alone. I noticed that detail and had to leave the room for water. We worked near each other sometimes, not together, near. The distinction mattered. She asked before offering suggestions. I accepted some and rejected others. She never sulked. When she made a point in critique, she looked at the work, not at me for approval. We were learning a language that did not depend on secrecy or spectacle. Laurel did not enjoy our evolution. She had lost her place on Vivian's presentation team and responded with the grace of a chandelier falling downstairs. She began praising my work too loudly in ways designed to sound patronizing. She asked Marisol whether she was still pursuing lost causes. She told Priya that Vivian had become distracted. Priya, to her credit, stopped laughing. The real confrontation came at the pre-showcase donor luncheon. I almost did not go. These events were traps disguised as opportunities. White tablecloths, small plates, large opinions. But Professor Eames asked me to speak briefly about accessibility and performance design, and I refused to let fear of social discomfort shrink the work. The lunch was held in the East Hall, a long glass room overlooking the Institute garden. Tables were arranged by discipline. I sat between Kira and Marisol, which helped, until Celeste Vale arrived. Vivian had not told me her mother was coming. She looked as surprised as I felt, which meant either Celeste had planned it that way, or the universe had developed a taste for symmetry. Celeste greeted donors, faculty, then Vivian with a kiss near the cheek that did not touch skin. Vivian stood straighter. Old training does not vanish because someone decides to become brave. During the main course, Laurel rose from a table near the windows with a glass in hand. She had no reason to make a toast. That was how I knew she would. I just wanted to say, Laurel began, bright as broken glass, how inspiring this year's showcase has become. So many unexpected partnerships. Personal and professional lines blurring in ways that are, I'm sure, very modern. Kira whispered. I can stab her with a dessert fork. Not yet, I whispered back. Laurel smiled toward me. It must be comforting to have powerful friends during evaluation season. The room did not gasp. It tightened. That was worse. Vivian began to stand. I touched the edge of the table, not her hand, and she stopped. She looked at me, asked without asking. I stood. My knees were not perfectly steady. My voice, when it came, was clear enough. You're right about one thing, I said. The lines between personal and professional can become complicated. That's why I documented every stage of my project independently, submitted my material logs for review, and requested that my evaluation panel exclude anyone with a personal connection to me or Vivian Vale. Laurel's smile thinned. I continued. If you're suggesting my work depends on Vivian's influence, say it plainly. I'm very tired of women hiding cruelty inside manners. The room went silent enough to reveal the hum of the lights. Laurel flushed. I wasn't suggesting... Yes, you were. My hands were cold, but I did not fold them. And if you have evidence, submit it. If not, stop using insinuation because it lets you injure people without taking responsibility for the wound. Marisol looked down at her plate, smiling into her napkin. Kira whispered, Beautiful. Celeste Vale watched me with an expression I could not read. Then Vivian stood. I need to add something, she said. My stomach tightened because part of me still feared what public Vivian might do when cornered. But she did not look at Laurel. She looked at the room. Anya and I were involved privately. I denied that publicly because I was afraid of scrutiny and because I had not yet learned the difference between discretion and cowardice. My denial created space for people to frame her as dishonest. That was my fault. Her work is hers. Her dignity is hers, and anyone who doubts either can take it up with the documentation, not with gossip. The cost arrived immediately. Celeste's face hardened. Donors stared. Faculty exchanged glances. Vivian's future with Vale and Venn, already strained, cracked audibly in the air. Laurel sat down. I did not forgive Vivian in that moment. Forgiveness was not a door kicked open by one speech, but something in me unclenched, because she had not saved me. She had stood where she should have stood months earlier, beside the truth, without demanding that I reward her for finally arriving. After the luncheon, Celeste intercepted Vivian near the garden doors. I was close enough to hear because I had gone to retrieve my coat, and because rich women apparently believed glass walls created privacy if they ignored witnesses. You have made yourself ridiculous, Celeste said. Vivian's voice was low. No, I made myself honest. You think this girl will stay? They never stay when they see the machinery behind the life. My hand tightened around my coat. Vivian did not look toward me. If she leaves, it will be because she chooses to, not because I let you frighten me into hiding her. Celeste's eyes narrowed. You sound like your father. For a second, Vivian looked struck. Then she steadied. Good. He knew when to leave a room that had mistaken control for love. Celeste slapped her. Not hard enough to injure. Hard enough to humiliate. The hallway froze. I moved before thinking. So did Professor Eames, from the other end of the corridor. But I reached Vivian first. Don't, Vivian said softly. Not to her mother. To me. It was not a plea to stay silent. It was a reminder. Choose. Don't react. So I chose. I stepped beside Vivian, not in front of her, and looked at Celeste. You don't get to make your daughter's courage look like misbehavior because it inconveniences you. Celeste's gaze swept over me. And you are? Old fear rose, quick and bright. The lab. The ruler. Vivian saying you must have mistaken it. I looked at Vivian. She did not answer for me. She did not rescue. She waited. I'm Anya Reed, I said. That's enough. Vivian's hand brushed mine, not taking, just there. I took it because I wanted to, because the hallway was full, because my choice mattered more than the audience. Celeste looked at our joined hands and understood she had lost the only leverage that mattered. The fallout was not romantic. Vivian's mother withdrew a promised donation from the showcase fund. The institute scrambled. Donors whispered. Vivian spent 3 days in meetings about whether her family name had become a conflict. I spent those same 3 days proving my material sources again, because institutions loved paperwork more than justice. Laurel issued a vague apology through Professor Eames, and then avoided me so thoroughly I began to enjoy entering rooms. Marisol brought me a paper bag of pastries after one of the meetings. For surviving rich people. I'm sorry everything got so public, she shrugged. Public is sometimes where truth pays rent. We sat on the steps outside the theater building, sharing a cinnamon roll. Are you okay? I asked. With liking you and not being chosen like that, she said. I winced. She smiled gently. I'm disappointed, not destroyed. There's a difference. You were honest with me. That counts. You deserve more uncomplicated timing. Probably. I'm very lovable. You are. I know. It's one of my burdens. She leaned back on her hands. For what it's worth, I think she loves you. I also think love is only useful if it changes how someone behaves. It has. Then decide based on the behavior, not the ache. Marisol remained in my life. Not as proof I was desirable. Not as a road not taken turned bitter. As a friend who had stood near me during a messy season and refused to become a casualty of someone else's love story. That mattered. The night before the showcase, I finally moved back into the apartment properly. I had been sleeping there again for a week, but my life was still half-packed. Clothes in canvas bags, toothbrush in a drawer, emotional exits marked in invisible ink. That night, after hours in the studio, I came home and found Vivian in the kitchen making soup badly. Is that supposed to be smoking? I asked. She looked at the pot. Steam can be dramatic. Vivian, I burned the garlic. You burned soup? The garlic is in the soup. So structurally, yes. I laughed so hard I had to lean against the counter. She watched me with a look that made my laughter soften into something else. What? I asked. I missed that. I did not run from the tenderness. That felt like progress too. We ate toast instead on the floor by the coffee table because the kitchen still smelled like Vivian's culinary ambition. For once, we did not talk about Laurel, Celeste, rumors, evaluations, or what we were. We talked about Kira's terrifying shoes and Marisol's plan to make donors stand in unflattering but honest light. Vivian told me she had declined a summer contract from Vale and Venn and applied to a cooperative studio instead. She told me without asking whether I approved. Later, as I stood to wash our plates, she said, I'm not assuming you're back because you're here. I turned. She looked nervous but did not hide it. I want you here. I love you here. But I know the apartment was part of how I kept you private. I don't want walls to do the work of trust. Something in me ached, but not from injury this time. I'm here because I want my bed back, I said. A smile. Reasonable. And because I want to see who we are when I'm not leaving to prove I can. Her expression changed. I'm not promising everything, I said. I'm not pretending the hurt is gone because you got brave. But I believe you're changing. I believe I'm changing too. Vivian stood slowly, leaving space between us as always now. May I kiss you? The question was simple. It carried the whole history of us. Every time she had touched me in secret. Every time she had failed to choose me in public. Every new way she had learned to ask. Yes, I said. The kiss was not desperate. That surprised me. It was careful, warm, A return without possession. She held my face like I was not fragile, but important. I touched the place on her cheek where her mother had slapped her, though no mark remained. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "For what?" "That loving me cost you." Vivian's eyes opened. "Loving you didn't cost me. Hiding did." I believed her. The showcase filled Holbrook's main hall with donors, faculty, students, families, critics, and enough expensive perfume to alter the atmosphere. My jacket stood on a platform under Marisol's precise, forgiving light. It looked better than I had imagined. Not prettier. Truer. The expansion panels moved when the model breathed. The closures released with one hand. People stopped in front of it and did not immediately say compassionate. They said clever, precise, beautiful, necessary. Vivian stood across the room beside her own collection. We had agreed not to hover around each other all night, not to prove anything, not to perform openness like a corrected mistake. We would work. We would let the work stand. Then a critic from a national design journal approached me with Professor Eames. He asked technical questions. Good ones. Difficult ones. I answered without searching the room for Vivian. Halfway through, he glanced at the crowd behind me and smiled. "I hear there was some drama around this piece." There it was, the test in casual clothing. Before I could answer, Vivian joined us. My body registered her nearness. My mind stayed clear. "There was gossip around the artist," Vivian said. "The piece was always sound." The critic looked delighted. "And you are?" Vivian glanced at me, not asking permission to exist, but offering me the choice of how much to share. I could have said, roommate, rival, classmate, nothing. I smiled. "This is Vivian Vale," I said. "Her work is across the hall. She also has a very annoying habit of being right about structural seams." Vivian's mouth curved. "Only when they're wrong." The critic laughed and asked about her collection. She answered, then turned the conversation back to my hinge system, with a generosity so clean it did not feel like repayment. We stood there in public, not clinging, not confessing, not hiding. Just two women with work, history, and a truth no longer dependent on darkness. Later, when the awards were announced, I did not win first place. That mattered less than I expected. I won a materials innovation grant large enough to fund a summer of research. Kira won a fabrication prize and shouted once in a way that startled a donor. Marisol's lighting received more compliments than the paintings it illuminated, which she called justice. Vivian received an industry residency from a studio unaffiliated with her mother. When her name was announced, she looked stunned. Then she looked at me. This time, everyone saw. After the ceremony, we gathered in the courtyard under strings of warm lights. People talked too loudly, relieved that months of pressure had become memory. Laurel avoided our cluster. Priya came over to apologize for not speaking sooner, and I accepted because her apology named the cowardice without asking me to make her feel better. Professor Eames shook my hand and said he looked forward to seeing what I built next. For the first time, I did too. Near midnight, I slipped away to the side garden where the noise softened. The air smelled like wet stone and early spring. I stood beside the reflecting pool, watching the lights tremble on the surface. Vivian found me there a few minutes later. "May I join you?" she asked. I smiled. "You keep asking." "I'm hoping it becomes habit." She stood beside me, shoulder near mine but not touching. In the water, our reflections hovered close together. "I used to think being chosen meant someone crossing a room for you," I said, "or defending you, or saying the right thing when everyone watched. And now I think being chosen is quieter most of the time. It's what someone does before the room turns to look." Vivian took that in. "I want to keep choosing you when no one is watching too. You were always good at that part." "No," she said. "I was good at wanting you when no one was watching. Choosing is different." I looked at her then, at the woman who had hurt me, learned from it, lost things, stayed, asked, changed. Not perfectly, not magically, but truly enough that my heart, cautious and no longer starving, stepped toward her without abandoning itself. "I choose you," I said, "but not the old version of us." Her eyes shone. "I don't want the old version." Good. She was exhausted. Vivian laughed, and the sound moved through the garden like something finally allowed to belong outside. She held out her hand. I looked at it, remembering the lab, the ruler, the hand I had lowered because she would not claim it. Remembering the dress, the zipper, her question, my answer. Remembering Marisol telling me not to choose a self that existed only in reaction. Remembering Kira saying consequences were rare. Remembering myself standing in a donor luncheon, voice clear. No longer waiting for Vivian to give me permission to be visible. Then I took Vivian's hand. We walked back into the courtyard together. Not because anyone needed to see, but because we were done arranging our lives around who might. Her thumb moved once across my knuckles, a small private gesture in a public place. I did not feel claimed. I did not feel hidden. I felt present. At the edge of the crowd, Marisol lifted her glass toward me. Kira made an exaggerated face of approval. Professor Eames pretended not to notice anything personal while noticing everything. Vivian leaned close enough for me alone to hear. "Your zipper is still holding," she said. I laughed. "That's your romantic closing line?" I panicked. "No, you didn't." She smiled, and this time there was no polished version of it. No performance, no careful distance. "No," she admitted. "I didn't." We stood under the courtyard lights, with my grant letter folded in my pocket, her hand warm around mine, and the night open around us. I had once thought love was proven by how intensely someone wanted you when the door was closed. I knew better by then. Love was the door opening. Love was the step into the room. Love was being free to leave and still choosing to stay. When Vivian lifted our joined hands slightly, not showing me off, not asking applause, only making space for us to move through the crowd together, I went with her, and no one had to ask who I was to her again.